Namaste, welcome back. There's another talk. Here we are at the pinnacle of this collection of videos strung together by the philosophy of yoga, um, where I'm focusing upon each and every chakra, kind of incidentally, but that just seems to be the way that the unfoldment unfolds. We are at the heart chakra today, a topic of conversation of which I'm personally probably most well versed in, for better or worse unknown reasons. It's fasting, meal times, um, intermittent fasting, um, as a spiritual practice. Um, it's the kind of consumption of it's the con- excuse me it's the consumption which provides nourishment on a deeper level. So I guess we have to change like what it is that we perceive that our relationship to sustenance and food, what nourishment means, because, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but I'll begin by saying that anything that's really done unconsciously, habitually, is pretty much a waste of time. And this is why I feel sometimes just to do some cooking, to cook food, is a great practice when done with awareness. I've spoken previously about fasting and the personal reasons and the benefits, how to do it correctly, what to do when fasting, to still engage in some light kind of activities, planting or just light exercise. It is advised not to do yoga on an empty stomach. It's also advised in yoga that the consumption of food is for the sake of keeping the body and mind together. That is because, well, I've come to feel that the self-talk gets a lot of magnification in the process, and in that lies the kind of relationship that we have to ourselves and to our animal kind of nature. I believe in heaven they don't have to eat any food, or the food they got there is really, really good, but it's a kind of non-incorporated sustenance. You can just eat light or experience or eat wisdom or something like this. Obviously the food is for the preservation of the body, so that would conclude logically that what happens during a fast when there's a cessation of food, obviously in time, I think maybe the stages of ketosis and stuff like that, mitosis, is when the body starts to eat itself. There's a kind of revelation of the sustenance itself, like what it is. When I am feeding myself, timing is a real important thing here, because I think within that there's a very anything that's like heavily associated with the body, habitual behavior can give a great revelation when really observed, but it takes a lot of sacrifice, and fasting is a good immediate form of sacrifice in which immediate results during and after the sacrifice. Like, it makes food taste a whole lot better, I tell you this. I think this is like what I want to focus on is like the reward, the action reward kind of mechanism, which is like the way that you train yourself out of habitual momentum to potentially experience something new. Obviously when one fasts, you become very, very sensitive to a lot of things, so there's a correct way to go about fasting. But the habit reward mechanism thing is like, you don't just eat anytime whenever you want if you're trying to be a disciplined person, you could incorporate food as a kind of reward thing for doing something, so that on a subconscious level you'll naturally kind of do what is necessary to do that isn't usually done happily. You'll do it knowing that there's a reward at the end. The reward is cheese. Not everybody, in terms of, I don't recommend fasting for everybody. But when one does fast, it reveals a lot of like your habitual eating, like unconscious eating, and I think it's been said, in the yogic texts. Definitely, I know Gopi Krishna said this in his book about Kundalini awakening, and him having lost a whole lot of appetite for years. It was just his karma, and that is that no pursuit and accomplishment in spirituality can take place without a thorough revision of the food that one's consuming, and because that's so fundamentally basic to the very principles of one's entire existence, the relationship you have with food, it manifests like a ripple outwards into the type of relationships of resourcefulness that you have in with your own immediately accessible resources at one's disposal. So, like, I think with that kind of magnified intensification of observation, that what your consumption, every piece of food takes on a whole new significance, and therefore, you become aware of like the subtle reality of the food. I'm not going to eat deep fried food because of the quality is not there. Also, I'm going to, if I'm practicing yoga in ahimsa, I'm not going to eat food that's entailed with a whole lot of karma. Whatever, it's taken a long time. There's a lot of processing from the farm to the plate. So one practicing ahimsa would try to nullify the distance and that which occurs during the initial productions of the food from the Annapurna up into the consumption of it. So yeah, this is what I'm saying. Organic raw food is obviously better on a chi pranic kind of level. But again, like, the main tenet of this is that everybody's individual, and in not eating, you'll find your individuality, what you are feeding, to then come to the realization that it could be endlessly subtle, endlessly to each in one's own. I'm not for like this eternal quest to get the best food or whatever. Again, like, the body for me only takes up a allotted amount of energy consumption and production, which is relative to what I'm doing. If there's a lot of physical work on that day, then obviously it's going to take more. It's very logical. It's going to take more fuel to produce that kind of result. It's subtle work. If I have what I call the grace of the opportunity of reflection, then I'm not going to bombard myself with too many external impetuses. I'm just going to focus on the basics. So fasting is great. In a nutshell, it's that opportunity to observe that reward mechanism for eating and processing, digestion. Where is the food? How is the food traveling? Because at that point, I think it's not just food, it's source. It becomes something like churning. Becomes, in Ayurveda, I think it's called, food becomes prana. So let's try to eat things that are not so distanced from where we came from, where we're going, and food that can aid one on the spiritual journey. Healthy, fresh, organic, clean food. And fasting second.